doing a little bit of a series this summer all about some of the top questions that I get asked when people find out that what I do for a living is help people reprogram and rewire their relationship with food. And one of the things I definitely get asked the most about is cravings, specifically sugar cravings, sugar, carbs, that kind of thing, right? So I definitely wanted to make sure that I came in today and talked about what do we do about cravings? What do we do when we're having them? How can we have less of them, right? How can we feel like we're back in control? So the culprit behind cravings, this is really the key thing we need to understand, is dopamine. It's not that you're weak. It's not that you have no willpower. It's not a sign of some kind of character flaw. So many of our cravings are associated with dopamine. And bear with me here, because this is where I love to geek out on the neuroscience behind our relationship with food, right? If you don't know me, my name is Sara and I'm a nutritionist, but I'm also a consistency coach. I help people transform their relationship with food so that they're able to stay consistent with the healthy choices they want to make, right? It's my experience that most of us already have a really good sense of what we should be eating and what we should not be eating. Of course, we can go into, lots of minutia and detail, but 80% of it we kind of already know, right? We know we should be eating more whole foods, less processed foods, more fruits and veggies, less sugar and processed carbs, right? We know this. Where we get stuck is in the doing it consistently. And so that's entirely what I do. My clients like to joke that I'm the nutritionist who never talks about food. And that's because I don't create meal plans. I don't post recipes. I really don't talk about food. What I talk about is what's going on up here, right? This, I think, is the missing piece of the puzzle. This is where we get stuck. We know what we need to do and we have good intentions, but we find it really challenging to stay on track consistently. And so that's what I do. So let's get back to cravings. The engine driving your cravings is dopamine. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, right? Which means it's a chemical in your brain, which we won't go into all the details, but it's really, to simplify it, it's really involved in helping neurons in your brain communicate with one another. And it has very specific roles, our friend dopamine. Really, dopamine's function is around learning and action. Dopamine is there to get you to learn and remember things and act. All right. Now, how is this involved in our cravings, right? What does learning and action have to do with cravings? Well, what dopamine does is first of all, learning, it creates a trigger, right? So when you do something, when you eat a food that is a very high source of, say, carbohydrates, which is something your body does need. But when we eat these super high carbohydrate foods like sugar, like processed carbohydrates that we find in our modern world, dopamine is released in your brain to learn, to remember that, oh, this is a great source of concentrated carbohydrates. And so it plants like a little flag, right? That's what dopamine does. It plants that little flag, which then becomes a trigger for you. So then when you walk through the mall and smell Cinnabon, maybe this is just my own personal experience, you feel triggered, right? The craving comes on because dopamine has planted that little flag in your brain saying, oh, that smell, that Cinnabon, that is a really beautiful high source of concentrated carbohydrates. We want that. Let's have more of that, right? Now, this was great back when we were cavemen and we wanted to remember where, say, a berry bush was, or, some concentrated source of food. Really, really useful, right? Then you would plant that little flag. You could always return to that berry bush and eat those nutritious sugars. Not so great in the mall with the Cinnabon, right? But the same thing is happening. So learning, that's one of the things dopamine does. And it's one of the ways it's involved with our cravings. It creates those triggers. Then dopamine is also responsible for action, getting you to act. Now, again, back when we were cave people, dopamine gave us the impetus to go hunting and gathering. Wonderful, right? But not so great, again, when we're in a world surrounded by 24-hour junk food, because what dopamine does is it puts you on this hamster wheel of always wanting more, right? Act, go get more. Let's hunt and gather. Let's get more. And again, useful back in the day when you needed to be foraging and gathering and always seeking out food, or you might starve to death. Not so great when you're surrounded by Hasty Markets, Walmarts, everything that has all the foods you could ever want, right? And yet dopamine is still playing that action role, trying to get us to act. So it creates those triggers and it gets you to act. It creates the trigger and the urge, right? That's what dopamine's doing. So the key too is that some people talk about dopamine as a feel-good neurotransmitter, right? That you eat something and then you feel good and then dopamine makes you want more of it. That's not really the case. One of the ways that dopamine gets you to act, gets you to feel that urge, is by creating what is called, not my name, but a great one, is the dopamine trap, right? And this is what the dopamine trap is, and we've all been in it. You crave something, right? You have that trigger, you have that urge, thanks to dopamine, and then you go and eat it, right? I'm going to have cookies. There's cookies upstairs. Someone baked cookies. I'm going to go have some, right? Have a couple cookies. Then you think, maybe just one more, right? Maybe just one more. Now, this is dopamine at work, right? Dopamine's giving you that urge, getting you to act. We should have more of this. It's saying, this was great. Let's do this again. Again, great back in the caveman days, not so good when we're surrounded by cookies. So, but you still have that desire, more. So you eat one more, right? Maybe just one more. Maybe just one more scoop of ice cream. Maybe just a few more chips. You eat it, but then you kind of still want more, right? Maybe just one more, right? And this is the dopamine trap. There is no end to it. Dopamine has no role in making you feel satisfied. It has no interest in you feeling satisfied. It's there to get you to learn and act, trigger, urge, right? That's all dopamine's job is. It's not interested in making you feel satisfied. So it's always the little voice saying, maybe just one more, but that itch never really gets scratched, right? You never really get that satisfaction. So this is the dopamine trap. So what do we do? How do we outsmart dopamine? How do we deal with the fact that we still have this neurochemistry that has been around for hundreds of thousands of years that is hardwired in our brains? What can we do, given that we live in a modern world that has changed significantly and we're now surrounded by food? What can we do? So a few tips I want you to think about. One is just to remember what you've just learned here. Recognize it. Call it out. Notice. Literally have a conversation. Say to yourself, oh, this is dopamine at work. And this is the dopamine trap that I'm dangerously close to falling into, right? That's what's going on here. And there is no end to this, right? Remember, this is the other thing I want to leave with you is remember that it's a trap, right? Like literally sit yourself down in your head and think, okay, wait. This is what Sara was talking about. This is dopamine at work. It's the trigger, the urge. It's getting me to learn, act. That's what it does, right? It's just doing its job. But that's what's happening here. And I'm fallen now potentially into the dopamine trap, which means there is no satisfaction coming. I'm just going to keep wanting more and more until I'm probably nauseous, right? Until I just hate myself. And that's usually where we end in the dopamine trap. So there's a lot of studies out now showing that just by becoming aware of what's going on, you can start to train your brain to manage its expectations around what the food will do, right? The more you're aware of it, the more you're conscious and you call it out and you realize, okay, wait, I'm just in the dopamine trap here. No good can come of this, right? This is not going to end well. That alone will give you some extra power, okay? Next, try thinking about seeing if you can find some activities in that moment that release serotonin. Now, serotonin is another neurotransmitter like dopamine, but unlike dopamine, it actually does leave you satisfied. It is the neurotransmitter that creates feelings of calm, peace, satisfaction, right? And things that release serotonin are things like laughter, right? Laughing at a good movie, connecting, having a great conversation, right? Human connection, love, exercise, right? If you go for a walk or, do a yoga class or go for a run or just some stretching, like just moving your body, getting some of those endorphins going will release serotonin. These are all things that that release serotonin, and when we have serotonin swimming around in our brains, that is when you're going to start feeling those feelings of satisfaction. That's when the itch will be scratched, right? So see if there's something you can do that might combat the dopamine with some serotonin, right? So think about some activities that do that for you, right? What leaves you feeling satisfied, happy, peaceful, calm, and lean into that when dopamine is driving the bus. And then finally, meditation. Anybody who's worked with me or done any of my programs, you know that I'm a big fan of meditation. And again, a lot of research out showing that about how powerful meditation is as a tool to counteract dopamine, because meditation creates great self-awareness. And when we are more self-aware, we're less vulnerable to the dopamine trap. So if you're brand new to meditation, don't be scared. It can be as simple as just sitting down and breathing, right? Just take 1 minute, go somewhere where you can just sit in a chair easily, close your eyes and just breathe, right? That can be your meditation. That's fine. It doesn't have to be fancy. But doing it regularly is the key. So even just doing a minute a day of meditation is gonna help you have more willpower, more strength to outsmart dopamine when those cravings hit. All right? I hope this was helpful. So just remember that what you're going to do when you realize that dopamine's driving the bus, when you realize you're precariously close to falling into the dopamine trap, or maybe knee deep in the dopamine trap, I want you to just have a little conversation with yourself. Recognize what's going on and remember that it's a trap. Okay? Recognize what's going on, call it out, and remember that it's a trap. Then think about boosting serotonin. What can you do? What are the activities in your life that release serotonin in your brain, that leave you feeling satisfied, calm, grounded, right? Maybe it's playing with your dog. Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's, phoning a friend. Maybe it's laughing at a funny movie. Like if you think about it, you probably know what some of those activities are. Lean into those when dopamine is when you find that dopamine is driving the bus. And finally, meditation, right? See if you're not already a meditator, see if you can just experiment with just like a minute a day of just breathing, just closing your eyes and just deep breathing. That's going to be enough to start. And what that does is it cultivates more self-awareness and mindfulness, which we know is a great tool in the battle against dopamine. Okay, I hope this was helpful. I would love to know, let me know in the comments below, when are you most susceptible to cravings? When do you feel like you're falling into the dopamine trap most often? I would love to know. And has this been helpful? Do you think this is something, will you be able to be more aware now of dopamine, remembering what you've learned here, and maybe navigate that dopamine trap a little bit more successfully? Hope it was helpful. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.